Joining me in this episode is Greg Verdino, the founder and COO of Cognitive Path, a specialist management consultancy focused on the intersection between AI and impact. Enjoy the conversation. You're listening to Working Forward, a future of work focused podcast from People Forward Network. These episodes pave the road ahead, helping us confidently step into the future as a leader who moves people forward. After all, the best way to predict the future is to create it. Let's go. All right, what's up, everybody? We are back with another episode of Community Podcast Live, and this is going to get turned into a Working Forward podcast episode. Today, we're talking about beyond automation, the human side of AI disruption, and we've got the ever wonderful and brilliant Greg Verdino with us. He's a futurist, he's an AI consultant, he's a keynote speaker. There's nothing he can't do. And he also is one of our founding members of the PFN community. So, Greg, welcome, my friend. Thanks for being on today.
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me. There are many things I can't do.
Oh, please, come on now. Well, I think as we unfold this episode, there's probably going to be a lot of things we're all like, oh, we can't do that yet, right, but it's coming kind of thing. This is going to be really fun. Usually on these, I usually have like a topic I just dig right into, but I'll tell you what, I want to flip the tables today. Because you're so brilliant on so many different things. I want to ask you, what's got your attention right now with AI disruption? Let's start with where you want to go first.
Absolutely. And I feel like for me, and this is maybe unintentionally broad, but also critically important, is I think the most important conversation, or one of the most important conversations happening around AI disruption in the workplace, is the impact of AI disruption in the workplace. And what I mean by that is we seem to be in a cycle of a renewed dialogue around the extent to which artificial intelligence is going to, or even is, driving widespread loss of jobs. And I think there's a lot of noise, a lot of hype, a lot of confusion, a lot of fear around that topic right now. And to me, for all of the things that are happening from a technological perspective, the introduction of new model, MTP, with that kind of stuff. I think to me, it always comes back to what are the human impacts of these technologies, and what do we make of them, and how do we think critically about the things we're hearing, the things we're seeing, the things organizations are doing, and how they affect the way people bring themselves to work and find value and purpose in their work.
There's no doubt about it that there's a lot of anxiety right now. Anyway, whether it's the Gallup engagement surveys, that engagement's never been high, but it's dipping even lower. That the number one thing that people are looking for from leadership is not trust anymore. First time it hasn't been trust, it's hope that they're going to have a future, that they're going to have a job. And then when you just look at a lot of the market reports that come from like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, more the government institutions, the outlook on the labor market from those in the labor market are that it's a tough economy right now. It's a tough job market, and there's a lot of anxiety and worry about it. Something that I want to get into with you here on that topic that you just brought up. You and I had a private conversation even a few months ago when we were prepping for this episode, and you were talking about like a marketing convention for marketing leaders that you had gone to just a couple months ago, and that a big part of the theme, there was some doom and gloom there in terms of what it means for marketing and how marketing has to step the game up. Share a little bit of some of those takeaways and the tone and just the things at that marketing convention for marketing leaders.
Sure. So, and I think the lessons apply well beyond marketing. This happened to have been a marketing conference, and it was hosted by a large, well-known marketing trade association. And it was interesting because a lot of the keynotes on the stage some of them were, kind of case studies and things like that, people working the grant saying, here's what we're doing. And they were perfectly believable use cases. They were practical. They were effective. But also a lot of the tone was around not just the potential to automate away a lot of routine marketing work, but it was almost gleeful in some ways. There was one chief marketing officer in particular, and I've seen this person speak at several conferences, who is almost giddy that she's been able to disintermediate her agencies entirely to produce campaigns predominantly using generative AI tools, or has been able to eliminate significant market research and consumer insights budgets by simulating focus groups and consumer personas and profiles and whatnot using tools like ChatGPT. And while these things are possible, they're certainly nowhere near perfect, but it is possible to do those things. And what was I found personally troubling, and I don't want to shoot arrows at any particular person, but what I personally found trouble was the glee with which some people were predicting the demise of the human marketer. And we're seeing a lot of that stuff now kind of come to the forefront again, as you hear, Facebook, for example, has rolled out new tools or is rolling out new tools that promise to fully automate the entire advertising campaign lifecycle for the Meta properties. I keep calling them Facebook like it's 1999, but you know what I mean.
I do too.
I refuse to call them Meta.
I know.
But there are tools that are capable of automating a lot of this work. Now, on the flip side, what I know as well from other conversations is the leadership in this particular association and a lot of senior marketers who are very engaged in these conversations are also recognizing that when we approach AI as a means of replacing rather than augmenting and enhancing human labor, we end up in a really weird situation, right? We end up in a situation where if we can, in fact, automate away a lot of the things that we expect entry-level employees or junior employees in general to do because they're rote, they're routine, they're repeatable, but they're also where tomorrow's senior employees cut their teeth and learn how to do the higher order, more strategic work. We end up with a situation where, who knows, 5 years, 10 years from now, we have a scarcity of senior leaders who actually understand the fundamentals of any given business, right? Whether that's entry-level marketers or first-year analysts or first-year associates in a law firm or a paralegal or whatever, right? You've got to learn somewhere. We have to cultivate talent from somewhere. We have to give them things that build their skill sets, their abilities, their capacities, their ability for critical thinking, all of these things. And we need to, I guess where I'm going with that is how important it is to make decisions that don't just make sense at the moment, but that actually consider the long-term implications of the decisions we've made. Because we're going to be reaping the rewards or, kind of dealing with the consequences of today's AI decisions for decades, if not more, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I were to summarize what you just said, all that brilliance, it's like, can be strategic. Like we actually have to think well first before using it. And I think that's one of the things, not saying don't hop in and use it, but in terms of using it, in terms of like with your teams, adopting the philosophy and approach, that you're going to have as a company in terms of how you approach the use of AI, it's critically important to talk through those things and get really clear on it. The thing that you brought up there that I think already is a concern, where there are some warning signs, early warning signs so far, is if we are outsourcing too much already to AI in terms of emotional intelligence, in terms of critical thinking, that there's already quote unquote kind of like some early signs of brain rot, a little bit of atrophy, where we're starting to give away some of those really important higher level human development, human cognitive skills that we're taking shortcuts to that, knowing that you have to struggle through it in order to get better at it. I think sometimes our approach is, instead of me having like this thing that I don't really want to, let me just have ChatGPT do it for me and then take it and be able to use it. And there's definitely some help in some of those things. But I think there's something about the human struggle is so important at times in terms of how we learn and learn to the point of developing mastery on something. And mastery is something to where we can eventually coach or consult on it, right? To be able to equip others to work through it as well. To your point, I sometimes get concerned, and this is coming from someone who loves the future of work, is using AI every single day, I sometimes have to catch myself and be like, should I should I bring AI along for the ride on this? Or should I struggle through this a little bit first before inviting it in? And I think that's where a lot of folks are. I think a lot more people are starting to dabble in it, but understanding kind of like the rules of engagement, so to speak, of like, what types of projects should I? What are the things maybe I should? When should I bring it into this process? That's been kind of my perspective, is that maybe a lot of people are struggling with that component. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I feel like I'm in the same boat as you in terms of behavior and kind of the way I use these tools, right? Because I use plenty of AI tools personally, in my life and in my work, right? And as a co-founder of an AI consultancy, clearly I
Right.
believe in the power and the potential of these tools when they are employed in the quote unquote right way, as obviously we're still learning what the right ways are. Everybody is, right. The technology is changing too quickly in some ways, although not all ways. It's, very new to a lot of people. But I think, what you're hitting on something critical. It kind of thread together a handful of things you said, right? That number one, fundamentally, it is about strategy, not technology. It's on the same token, it's about culture, it's about humanity, it's about all of these other things far more than it's about technology. Prior to going sort of, sharpen pencil deep into, that's a terrible analogy, but into AI, as I spent a decade or so focused more broadly on digital transformation. And, you know, I'm not the only person to say this. I may have been one of the first, but I'm not certainly not the only person. I very quickly came to the realization that this is not about technology. It's about humanity, right? It's business transformation. It's human transformation. The technology is 20% at best. It's the easy part. You can buy the systems you need. And I don't mean to minimize that for any technology people who might be listening. Yes, it is incredibly difficult to integrate disparate systems. Yes, you inherit a lot of technology debt you need to deal with. Yes, data strategy, data governance, and all that stuff is a mess, and you got to make sense of it. But at the end of the day, that turns out to be the easy work when you then put in the messy, soft stuff of human beings, right? Now you have to deal with, adaptivity and adoption and change management and fear and uncertainty and all of those other things that cause people to either not go along with the program or require leaders to actually do a better job of setting the vision, providing the hope, as you said, communicating clearly, making sure everyone is on that journey. So it's the same thing now with AI, right? That is it to me, it is primarily about the human stuff. And it does seem, and this is where some of the pieces come together, is as you talk about how, there are some studies now beginning to sort of show us, or at least hint at the idea that over reliance on artificial intelligence may in fact reduce our ability to, so let's say, think critically. Um, Certainly, an over reliance on AI can limit our ability to develop deep expertise and mastery if we literally just give our agency to the agent, so to speak. But I think a lot of it comes down to, at a personal level, making more informed choices, thinking critically about how we integrate AI into the way we go about our lives and our work, and maintaining a healthy skepticism of the information that AI provides, the work AI does. You would never in a million years, I mean, maybe you would, but you shouldn't, but you would never in a million years hire an intern and give them free reign to produce every piece of work, no questions asked, just get it out there, right? But in a lot of ways, that's how we use artificial intelligence. I'm writing an email. I need to write it fast. I don't need to write it right. Or I need an insight quickly. I don't need a deep insight. Right. And that's not true. In some cases, it absolutely is a benefit. In other cases, it becomes a detriment. And I think the other thing related to this is, that business leaders need to exert their own authority and agency when making decisions about the integration of AI into their organizations. I think a lot of times we're seeing business leaders go along with the Silicon Valley narrative and believing 99% of companies are ahead of where I am today, believing all of these companies are getting all of these benefits from artificial intelligence and I've been left behind, of believing that if only I did more AI, I could be faster, more profitable, blah, 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 right? And that's where you start to see things like the Duolingo, kerfuffle, right? Where for anyone, I'm sure everybody is aware, but for anyone who happens not to be, that CEO was proud to make that very public but very tone deaf declaration about how he would be eliminating humans from the loop in order to become an AI first company. And it had clear blowback, not just internally for the employees, but customers said, no, that's not what we're paying for. Right? So there are certainly ways to do AI right, and there are ways to integrate AI deeply and fundamentally into an organization as an enabler of its strategy and its operations. But carte blanche, giving AI all of the authority and all of the agency at the risk of disintermediating and disenfranchising the humans in the business, to me, is not a sustainable answer. So I always, when we work with companies and I speak with leaders and, from the stage, if I'm giving a keynote or if I'm blabbing, incessantly on a live stream or a podcast, to me, it's always, you need to think about how this empowers and elevates the humans in your organization. You're in no way obligated to drive everything to the lowest common denominator.
I'm glad you brought up the Duolingo example, because I think it is a perfect use case of, here's one end of the spectrum, as you just mentioned, where the CEO is like, yeah, we're going to be honest with you. Our philosophy here is we're going to cut a lot of jobs that humans are doing. And unless it's proven that AI can't do it, then we're not going to hire humans to do it. I agree with you. Good luck with that, because I think we've already seen some use cases of where that's been done, where then there was a complete a mea culpa. Klarna, being one of the more common ones here. So for those who haven't heard of Klarna, it's basically a pay-as-you-go type service, really big company. I'm not sure how many billions it's worth, but they took the same approach as Duolingo. Their CEO said, we're getting rid of our whole customer experience, customer support department. It's all going to be run by AI bots. They did it. It was an abject disaster. I'm not sure how many billions they lost, but it was enough to the level that the shareholders, the board, the C-suite immediately were like, yeah, that was a bad decision. We need to reach back out and get all of our humans back into the CX department to add the human touch back in. Yeah. So to your point, it's just, and I think this is where sometimes the tension comes, Greg, is we've never had a technology or a tool that can go this fast. And it's so easy to just plug into and be like, I'm just going to have a natural conversation with this thing and look at what it can do and how fast it can do it. Weighing that with sometimes slowing down and asking the right questions yourself internally of like whether or not I should be using this for this particular thing. Or if I'm going to use it, I'm still going to make sure that I'm the one that's taking it. And I may take it with my leadership team. I may filter it through some other people to make sure before we act on this, that we really do think this is the right decision or the right approach.
Yeah.
And I think that's so tough with it in particular, I think in part because of how fast it is and how good it is at being able to get very quick responses to things.
Yeah. And how convincing it can be even when it's wholly wrong.
That's true too. Yeah, shout out to Eric Branstetter on our team. He was telling me how he's been using it a lot whenever he's doing recordings of meetings. And so he'll ask it for feedback on me. Well, he said this last time, there was one that he was like, hey, whenever I did this event in the community, I know that it could have been better, but the AI is not telling me really how. It's being way too nice in terms of its feedback. So he gave another prompt to it and he said, okay, basically, stop lying to me. Give me what you really think in terms of what I just put in there. And then he was like, all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, this has to go, this has to change and stuff like that. So it's a good reminder too, that the things that we get sometimes, it may sometimes create, we may be unaware of it. It could be creating an echo chamber of giving us the types of things that we want to hear.
Yeah.
At
It's
times.
100%. I spend, I'm sure, way too much of my free time poking and prodding at exactly that thing where I'll give it some ridiculous idea and it'll be, what a fantastic idea. Here's how you can make it happen. And I'm like, this is the worst idea I ever came up with. Absolutely right. It's a terrible idea. And it like it goes like this back and forth and back and forth. And it's just, it's, if something in its code, it's, it's written to please, right? That's a problem, right? In that it is always agreeable unless you tell it not to be agreeable, which is something that in certain circumstances, if you're asking for a critique, it shouldn't be so agreeable, right? So it tends to confirm whatever biases we bring to the system, and validate the things that we introduce in the form of our chats, right? That's the problem. And obviously it's, sort of persistent challenge with hallucinations, right? The invention of facts, the invention of citations and so on and so forth, which, some experts say isn't even really solvable and may in fact in the latest models be kind of sort of escalating into a bigger problem because now AI is beginning to get trained on AI generated content.
That's right.
So it's something is out there and it's bad information to begin with. It becomes part of the training data set and now gets regurgitated and recycled out as even worse information. But that, comes down again. The tool is the tool. It does what it does. It works when it works, but it comes down to, the human being in the loop having a level of sort of AI literacy, to really think critically about what they're seeing, to check the facts. I always tell, we do a fair number of, trainings and workshops and skills development and stuff like that. And one of the first things I tell people is at the end of the day, you are accountable for whatever this machine produces, right? No one's going to give you a gold star if you point and say, wasn't me, it was Chat GPT. That's why these numbers are wrong. That's why the facts are off. That's why, the legal precedent is actually not true. That's why whatever field you're in, at the end of the day, you're going to get the blame. You're not going to get the glory. Right? So, as a human being, you need to maintain that authority, and then understand that you have the accountability, and that doesn't change, right? From the days pre-AI, employees have always been accountable for their work product. And if the work product was good, theoretically, they got rewarded. If the work product sucked, theoretically, they did not, right? The same is true now. We don't have a scapegoat necessarily. Unless you're a CEO, in which case AI becomes your scapegoat for things like layoffs when the economy downturns or whatever. But that's a whole separate story.
The AI literacy thing you just brought up is fascinating to me. I'm going to put my psychologist hat on. When I used to work in schools, not as much. The work that I do now is CXO at People Forward Network, and then some of the HR consulting I've done. But I'm going back to the days of working in school. At that time, when I was working in schools, a lot of like the digital citizenship type stuff or the literacy type stuff was around social media at that time, around that footprint. This concept you brought up of we really need to start having some AI literacy beyond the technical skills. Not this is how you use the tool, but like, here's how to be a smart consumer of it.
Yeah.
Here's how to make sure that you're still being wise and strategic in your use of it, whether it be in your personal relationships, whether it be on the business side, whether it be life. Because where it's going, I mean, we've been focusing on the business side, but where it's going is at some point, a lot of us are probably going to have like an Optimus robot potentially in our homes or assisting with things. It's going to continue to become more integrated.
Absolutely.
In different aspects of our lives.
Yeah.
And then that's going to up in terms of the privacy, the security type things. Those are going to be some really important questions you have to ask. Where I'm going with that is, Greg, you posted something from another gentleman on LinkedIn, and this is going to be a first time that we've done this on Work for a Conversation. I'm going to do a screen share. I've got the notes ready.
It works. Now I have to, hopefully it's not too embarrassing. What was it?
No, it was a great one. It was a share. It was something that you shared from another thought leader who actually owns an AI company. And so I thought that's what made this really interesting. And I shared it with our PFM team this week. So without further ado, let me bring this up because it ties into this point. Give me 1 second here. We're going to open it up here. It's the first time we've done this. All right. Quick test. Can you see that on your side, Greg?
Yep.
Sweet. So you shared this from Stephen Klein. Stephen is the founder and CEO of Curiouser AI, an AI company. And this is through the lens of thinking about the adoption of AI through the lens of kids, right? Because now what we're hearing a lot of is that we need to start teaching AI younger and younger in school. It needs to be part of the kindergarten curriculum and things like that. And I just thought this was a really timely post on his part. He said, let's talk about our kids, our treasure and our future. I get asked all the time, Stephen, how should we manage AI and our children? As a parent, teacher, and a CEO, number one, keep your kids as far away from generative AI and screens as possible. Number two, make sure they spend lots of time with other humans in person. Number three, make sure they read and do their own writing and learn to communicate. Number four, make sure they struggle. Excellence is difficult and requires sacrifice. I love that. Number five, teach them to be positive, optimistic, but also skeptical. And then number seven, teach them to help other kids. Many are quietly suffering. I won't go through the rest of this, but I love where he just said, what kids really need to learn is they need to learn how to think critically, read deeply, learn persuasively, ask hard questions, speak clearly. And when I'm going to pull this down now to come back over here. When you shared that really tugged on my heartstrings because I'll tell you, I have 4 sons right now, 11, 8, and twins who are 4. They just turned 5 actually. But the 2 older boys are starting to ask me more questions about AI, robots. What's the future going to look like? And they're getting more curious about it. And so it was a good reminder for me of there's going to be a struggle, a balance that even I'm going to go through as a parent, setting aside being a teammate in the work that we do at PFN. There's also going to be a personal side of this struggle for me at times that I think through. I think everyone on our team of in those personal relationships you have, whether you're a parent, a friend, whatever it might be, thinking about those kind of questions of how do I want to use it? These sound like simple questions, but we really do need to take the time to think about them well, not only in our personal lives, but also in businesses.
Yeah, 100%. And, the personal side of it, to focus there for a bit, is critically important. And I think when we get so wrapped up in the business opportunities and obligations and challenges and all of that related to AI, we forget, I think, in a lot of ways that, exactly what we're saying, that over the long haul, the biggest implication is not going to be how your company's content marketing department can crank out blog posts more quickly or whether you can cut your customer support team in half. It's ultimately going to be, how does this affect every aspect of our lives and the way people connect with one another, the way consumers connect with companies? Something and this again is probably relatively speaking trivial compared to the deeper, richer stuff around what does this mean for our children as they grow up in a world where they're surrounded by AI, and how do we teach them digital literacy, information literacy, media literacy, AI literacy, because there's not a good answer to any of those things, right? We're still struggling with social media, maybe even more so today than we were 10, 20 years ago. It's going to be 10x the problem when AI is so prevalent and so utterly convincing that, it's impossible to discern what's real and what's not. And we're getting there very quickly, unfortunately. But I think going back 2019, it was pre-COVID. I know, I was talking about, as part of my speeches, was talking about, there's a day coming, and ironically, I included in a speech that I called Marketing 2025. But
The future's here.
But I wasn't that far off when I say it. Is I said we're going to kind of enter an age where every consumer is going to have a bunch of AIs. I don't even know if I called them AIs, but a bunch of, algorithmic digital assistants that are going to interact on their behalf with all of the companies that they do business with today or tomorrow, right? That I'm not going to shop for things. I'm going to just get those things. My agent will shop for them. And I didn't call them agents at the time, right? But effectively, this sort of vision for almost machine to machine commerce, that, all the things that I, as a consumer, don't like to deal with, trying to find a flight, trying to find the flight at the right price, negotiating a car, purchase, canceling a gym membership, renegotiating an insurance something or other or whatever, right? Switching my bank, all the things that we do because we have to. We're adults and we have to do them. Will one day be done by digital assistants on our behalf. And they'll be, those digital assistants will act on the basis of data over emotion, right? They will complete these actions based on our prior behaviors, but also with an understanding and an anticipation of what matters most to us. Are we, to use a dumb example, are you a Charmin toilet paper guy until you die, or do you go for whatever's cheapest, right? In that scenario, that's either a dream or a nightmare for Charmin, right? Because if your AI assistant knows you're Charmin until you die, then no other brand will ever get consideration.
That's wild.
If you're a priced buyer, then Charmin's going to have a really hard time winning you back once it's discovered a lower priced product. Your AI has discovered a lower priced product, right? So we're starting to see a bit of that in a very kind of rudimentary way as we shift from search engine optimization to answer engine optimization, right? All of those, people going to ChatGPT instead of Google, or going to Google and just reading the search, synthesized AI response at the top rather than going through the blue links, right? We're already getting there, right? It just, now when we introduce AI agents, and right now, much of the conversation on AI agents is how do we automate processes inside the work environment? But eventually that becomes everybody's got a bunch of agents doing all their bidding in their personal lives, theoretically allowing us to focus on the things that are more, sort of more, higher order, right, in our lives. But you got all this stuff going on. But anyway, my point in all of that, rambling, I'm very rambly today, but
No, you're not. Those are good points.
In all of that rambling, my point is the impact and the effects and the implications of consumer AI adoption at a level far greater than what we're seeing right now. And especially when AI essentially becomes ambient, it's embedded, it's embodied, it's in everything. That is going to far dwarf the stuff that we're dancing around with to optimize and become more efficient business people.
There's so much good of what you just shared there. Like, you blew my mind with so much of that. The one in particular, just, I'm saying it out loud because I'm processing it, of like basically that the agents are going to get to know us and it's going to be like, you're a Charmin person. And nobody else is then going to get a shot to sell toilet paper to that person. The way that those things, like, that just blows my mind to think about those things. And you also mentioned that you think that we're farther along in terms of like intelligence and development of AI than probably what a lot of people think. And I agree with you on that. And I know that this person I'm about to bring up, I'm going to bring some quotes up from them. This person is polarizing, right? It's Sam Altman, the founder and the president of OpenAI, which is the parent company of ChatGPT. Here's what I will say. Whether or not your opinion is you like him or you don't, or you agree with him or you don't, I think there's one thing that we can all agree on is he's making big time decisions. And whether or not we like it or agree with it, when he speaks up and he writes a blog, we should probably lean in and pay attention to what he's saying, because he is going to be one of the biggest players in terms of what the future looks like, whether we agree with it or not. And he just had an interesting blog that he said, I thought this was interesting. He called it the gentle singularity. I'm going to pull out a couple quotes that I think are good things for us to talk on this topic today. He called it the gentle singularity. And I thought it was interesting that when he put it out, he said, this might be one of the last blog posts I do 100% so well without the use of AI. And I thought that that was an interesting twist that he kind of threw in there, almost as kind of like a swan song of like, okay, here's one of the aspects of what I've done in my life, the blog. It's 100% me. That he's now saying, I think we've developed to the point where I'm comfortable to start moving in this direction, where I invite AI into my creative writing process for my blog. So I thought that was fascinating. But here are just a couple of the quotes. And then what I'm going to do is I get your reaction. I'm going to drop the link to that blog article in here. So whoever is on with us live today, you can check it out. But also we'll make sure it's in the notes for the pod. But Greg, here were just a couple of the quotes from Sam Altman, again, the CEO and founder of ChatGPT. And this is on the gentle singularity, which, by the way, for those who may be the first time you heard singularity, that's a theoretical point in the future, at which point technology has advanced beyond anything that we can conceive of, really, on human intelligence. Here's what one of the paragraphs that he had. In some big sense, ChatGPT is already more powerful than any human who has ever lived. Hundreds of millions of people rely on it every day and for increasingly important tasks. A small new capability can create a hugely positive impact. A small misalignment multiplied by hundreds of millions of people can cause a great deal of negative impact. And another quote, 2025 has seen the arrival of agents that can do real cognitive work. Writing computer code will never be the same. In 2026, we'll likely see the arrival of systems that can figure out novel insights. And then in 2027, we expect to see the arrival of robots that can do tasks in the real world like humans. And then the last one here, and then I want to get some of your reactions, whether it's on these quotes or if you've had a chance to check out his blog. This last one, the rate of technological progress will keep accelerating. And it will continue to be the case that people are capable of adapting to almost anything. There will be very hard parts like whole classes of jobs going away. But on the other hand, the world will be getting so much richer so quickly that we'll be able to seriously entertain new policy ideas we never could before. We probably won't adopt a new social contract all at once, but when we look back in a few decades, the gradual changes will have amounted to something big. Initial reactions to any of those, or if you've checked out what he put out there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I read it, of course, and I agree with you. It's absolutely 100% worth reading. I tend to historically, I mean, and again, maybe it goes to critical thinking, and everybody should take everything Sam Altman says with a grain of salt, right? kind of what's the motivation, for a guy that needs to maintain a multi-billion-dollar valuation and, drive, maintain a market leadership position and, kind of drive the narrative around the inevitability of AI. That said, I think fundamentally what he's saying in this particular post is true, right? It's like that old, William Gibson quote that everybody, myself included, was fond of throwing around for a long time about the future being unevenly distributed, right? The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And I think this has sort of echoes of that in it. And I think what he's writing there is correct and true. That the technology is really farther along than the average person understands. And I said technology, it's really technologies, right? Because we tend to paint AI with a single brush. Most people only know AI within the context of ChatGPT in a practical sense. But there are hundreds and hundreds of technologies that make up artificial intelligence. And some of them have been with us for a very long time, right? Since the 50s, right? And others have, been embedded into our lives in ways that we don't think about anymore. And I think that's where he, is making an interesting and important point, right? He talks about, when he talks about the gentle singularity, and you framed what the singularity is, broadly, I think for years and years, it's always been almost like this. It will be an aha moment. The skies open up and the robo god descends, and you're right. But like anything, these technologies become important in a sense, not when they're, notable for what they achieve or help us achieve, but for the fact that we don't even notice they're there at all, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what he's talking about. That these it feels like a small thing that you can have a human language conversation with a machine, and the machine responds in human language you understand. That seems like a small thing, but right, that takes AI outside of the lab, outside of the data science department in a way that was never possible before. Um, doesn't mean it's perfect technology, and in every way, AI is far more powerful than maybe some people realize. At the same time, it's also far more awful and ineffective and rudimentary in some ways than what we expect of it, right? And that's the part of like the Sam Altman divisiveness or polarity that bothers me, is he so overpromises and overhypes everything. It's all exploding head emojis, right? No matter how incremental the improvement is, or even if it's an improvement at all. We've been promising, GPT 5, 6, 7, 8, right? They never come. We're now at 0.03 Pro and 0.4, and like all of these incremental model releases. Um, so but all of that said, it's the idea that it becomes ambient, it becomes part of the environment, that we don't notice what AI is actually doing. We're just interacting with, or through, or on behalf of, or sort of in some way with artificial intelligence. It's just part of the environment. Um, and that even comes back to some of the conversations we were having before, because social media was kind of like that in a way. There was a time when, in the early days, I'm sure you remember it, when social media was sort of a tricky thing. Like if you wanted to have a social media footprint, you had your photos on Flickr and your blog on Blogger and your social, your friends on Friendster, and
Yeah.
were doing, you were checking in on Foursquare to become like the mayor of your grocery store, and like all these stupid things, and you had this fragmented presence, and you almost had to be committed to it. I mean, I made my name as a social media expert for doing all that crap in the days when other marketers didn't want to. And then all of a sudden, it almost became like so simple, like practically for years and years, Facebook was practically speaking the internet for a lot of people, or Twitter became the internet for everybody. It just became, and everything just became embedded, right? You didn't think about, what you were doing, how you were doing it. It's just part of what you do. The same is true of digital. The same is true of a lot of technologies, right? You don't get into your car and necessarily think about the fact that, there are sensors. You're sitting in an Internet of Things object that's surrounded by sensors that are letting you know it's dangerous to switch a lane, or that you have a satellite connection, and your map is using machine learning to reroute you around a pothole or an accident or whatever, right? You don't think about that because it's all invisible to you, and it's happening, right? You're not going to AAA and picking up the triptych and mapping your route and asking your person in your passenger seat, are there any exits we can get off to get around this traffic jam, right? It's just happening. It's being fed to you. But the same thing is happening, I think, in a lot of ways with AI, especially traditional AI, machine learning, right? Where the algorithms are shaping the information we see, the stuff in our feeds, the recommendations we get from Amazon, Spotify, Netflix, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, auto correct on your phone and sentence
Yeah.
completion in your Gmail, right? All of these things are artificial intelligence in the broad scheme of things, even if they're not generative AI, right? And they're all invisible in a lot of ways. This will become increasingly true, and robotics will become increasingly invisible if they become more commonplace and just become normalized, right? That our stuff gets delivered by drones and robots, and we have a robot in the house instead of a housekeeper and whatever. Um, you know, So anyway, we are in that weird liminal space where technology is both far better and far worse than we recognize, where it is being unevenly distributed. And there's a lot of aspects that uneven distribution. It's, we're over indexing in areas that I don't believe fundamentally matter a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, like using generative AI to write an email for us, under indexing in areas like using AI to solve the world's wicked challenges. But, it is going there. So it is both, more and less embedded than we know and that we want to believe. It's also unevenly distributed, unfortunately, by economics, by class, by geography, by race, by gender, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So, we run the risk, and this is, I think Sam hints at this a little bit in that piece. We run the risk that the broader deployment of AI, the deeper integration of AI into how we live and work, exacerbates the challenges that many people face in the world today. It exacerbates inequalities. It has all of the, or will have all of the power in the world to address those things, but it may also have the opposite effect. And I think that's where Sam astutely, in almost sort of like a systems thinking kind of way, is kind of, recognizing that a small one iota of misalignment can have devastating, far-reaching, fast-moving consequences for a lot of people. And now that gets us to, sort of heady stuff like misalignment with whose values.
Yeah.
Because you and I are not building these tools, so we're inheriting somebody else's sense of what these tools should be aligned with, but we are using the tools. So every one of us, wherever we are in that food chain, has a role to play in determining whether this is a massive force for good or something that fundamentally causes a lot of damage. It's that old saying, technology is neutral. It's how we use it. So again, going back even to, the earliest parts of this conversation, it really does come down to the human factors. How do we choose to use these tools? No one is forcing us to use AI in the way Silicon Valley and Sam Altman are telling us we must use AI. So thinking critically even about what we're hearing out of OpenAI, out of Anthropic, out of Perplexity, out of Microsoft, out of Meta, out of Google, about how AI will change the world, we need to think that's how AI may change the world. And we need to think about what are the various scenarios and how do we position ourselves, our companies, our children, the people we love, our communities, our countries, the economy, to thrive regardless of how this technology gets rolled out and adopted over time.
I love that. Us empowering ourselves and our organizations to choose what we want our story to be around AI. Have you seen the Mission Impossible movie, the latest one?
I have not.
So the last two, the one that was out last summer and then this one, really kind of the crux of the story, the plot. Sorry if I'm going to ruin it for everybody, but it's around this thing called the Entity. It's AI trying to take over the world kind of thing. And so Tom Cruise has got to save the day, of course, with Tom Cruise's magic. But the reason I bring that up is, Greg, are you ever curious, like, if you could be like a fly on the wall in some of the AI labs to actually know the truth of how far down the path we are in terms of super intelligence? Because that's what I wonder about sometimes.
Yes.
I mean, I'm only on the consumer grade side, right? Most of us are. It's like, that's what they ship to us. That's what we get. That's what we're playing with to learn the limits and boundaries of it. But behind closed doors, and the reason I bring it up is I think Altman was starting to, I don't know what the motivation was, whether there's truth to it or whether it's just to sensationalize things. But I kind of read between the lines as I was reading it, like, I really wonder if behind the closed doors, if they're closer to super intelligence than what most of us in the public think.
Yeah, I mean, that's always, to me, I think it's worth considering and sort of holding in our head as a scenario, right? That is imminent, right? And he, even in that post, I think he references super intelligence.
He does, yeah.
Which is, a deliberate choice in a lot of ways because super intelligence comes after general intelligence, and we're not at general intelligence yet. He argues in some ways maybe we are, but I mean we're not truly at general intelligence in the sense that an AI system can kind of do all of the things a human can do. It doesn't have a lot of, it doesn't have, sort of advanced reasoning. It doesn't have, the kind of context and knowledge of the world, memory in a lot of cases, true memory, of things. It also can't, like a human might. And I know, it's hard not to anthropomorphize, obviously AI systems, um, but the sort of the idea that, like as a human child, right, you don't, and I know you're a psychologist, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm a sociologist, or not really, but I studied sociology. Um, but, like there's like, a human only needs, a baby only needs to really burn their finger on a flame once to know that fire is hot and that every fire is going to burn their finger. Or you don't need to see need to see millions of trees to know what a tree looks like and identify some new kind of tree as a tree. A tree you've never seen before, right? Maybe you've lived in, the Pacific Northwest all your life and have only seen like towering evergreens, and you have no television, no movies or anything, but you go to Florida, you see a palm tree, it's a tree. Right? you know, we have an ability to generalize in a way that, that technology, doesn't get generalized. But anyway, I'm getting off track. Is it possible they know that they're far closer to something than they're telling us and that we might recognize? It's possible. It's also entirely possible that LLMs are hitting a dead end or at least a point of diminishing return, and they're an off ramp to general intelligence, which a lot of people like Gary Marcus and even Jan LeCun at Meta firmly believe that LLMs are not the path to general intelligence. And these are experts in their own right. Obviously Jan LeCun is, heads Meta's AI labs, and Gary Marcus for years and years and years has been a prominent AI researcher. Right. So it's possible, it's equally possible that we are nowhere near as far along as the AI labs want to pretend, and farther along than they're letting us know. And it might be, again, in terms of this uneven distribution, in some places, both are true, right?
Right. That was fascinating. And I can't believe we're already starting to come up again. We got about 8 minutes or so left here. And Greg, we've kind of covered all over the board. Everyone who's been here, who's listening live right now, but also is going to be listening to podcast episode. Obviously, they've seen the breadth and depth of everything, at a really high level when it comes to AI. Here's what I want to do with the last few minutes. Let's start digging into some really practical things in terms of the work that you're doing with some clients around your AI consulting. You really bring this home with some practical tips for folks, because I know I could spend all day up there in the stratosphere with you on stuff. I absolutely love it. But let's now break it down a little bit for folks and be like, hey, in light of a lot of these things we just talked about, here's some good takeaways. The thing that I want to ask you about is, you've mentioned to me before, I think you've got a framework around these 3 horizons to innovation in terms of how people approach innovation. Kind of walk us through that a little bit. And then also maybe walk us through some of the work, whether it's around the three horizons to innovation or other AI work that you're doing with some clients. Kind of help us understand some of the practical things right now, hands-on, what you're doing around these things.
Sure. So I wish I could take full credit for those 3 horizons, but they probably first came out of a client's mouth many, many years ago, and then I've just kind of stolen them and used them over time.
Get your IP now.
But they've left the business, and they're very happy now doing stuff kind of offline. You've got like doggy daycares and spas and stuff, and beautiful stuff with your pet lover. But I'm sure he's not using this anymore, so I'll take it. And this is not specific to AI, but something he said that stuck out to me, which is why I still use it, is I think a lot of organizations get hung up on innovation and become essentially they roadblock themselves because they hold themselves to too high an innovation standard. And something, this sort of point you're bringing up that he made that I've stolen is, that this sort of thinking of innovation sort of within its context, that there is, things that are new to us, right? So inside your organization, let's say, things your organization has never done, even if others have. There are things that are new in your category, your industry, your sector, however you want to think about it, even if other industries, categories, or sectors have done these things already. And then there's, of course, things that are new to the world, right? So new for us, new in our competitive space, and new to the world. When a lot of people think of innovation, they think about new to the world. And that's a very tight standard to hit. Whereas in some cases, it might be taking a hard-won lesson from a different industry and applying it to your own. That's new to our category. Or simply, we're not doing this thing everybody else in our business is doing for some reason, because it's a blocker or what, there's a blocker or whatever. There's a cultural problem. There's a technology problem. There's a people problem, whatever, an economic problem. But there's some reason we've not done this thing before. And sometimes it is good enough to do that thing for the first time in your organization, because that's where you might get a lot of quick wins. And I'm not saying go for the easy and the obvious. But if there is something your organization is not doing, starting that thing, if it is right for your organization, is maybe enough innovation to unlock sort of open the floodgates, to unlock the potential and the promise of innovation. As that relates to AI, one sort of, and this kind of loops into, sort of like some of the work we've done. We do a fair amount of work helping organizations really kind of get past like the culture of no, and start to experiment in earnest with things like AI. And there's one client we were working with, which is, they're a large association in the healthcare space, and you're very prominent, but had a very, both between the CIO and the chief counsel, had a very strict no AI policy. They put that policy in writing, which effectively said, don't use AI, but had this one little caveat with a little blue link that said, unless you use one of the approved tools, which you can find here. So they asked us to review this policy for them, and we go through, and I click that blue link, and it brings me to a page on their intranet. We had, authorized accounts, access all of their systems for part of a larger project. And it brings me to a page that's blank, top to bottom blank. So I go to the CIO and say, hey, here's a problem. This link, I don't know if you realize this link goes to a blank page. And he's like, no, you don't understand. That is our list of approved AI tools.
Wow.
I used to about a year ago. So anyway, ultimately we got brought on to shift the culture. And what we, kind of saw very quickly was there was a lot of energy. We did it through a gamification thing. We kind of ran what we called an AI Olympics. They had their departments kind of competing against each other as teams to come up with AI ideas, and they got prizes and all that kind of crap. It was a great, great program, tons of engagement. And there was we were coaching them through a training period. So they were learning how to use the tools hands-on. And, they put together essentially presentations at the closing ceremonies to earn medals and get prizes and stuff, and people loved it. I mean, as an organizational psychologist, you would probably love, there was gamification, there was people came in like costumes, and we tried to get the CIO to wear a toga to go back to the early bird thing. That got kiboshed go quickly. But anyway, the point is, what we found was, for an organization that was literally at like square zero with artificial intelligence, and they had legitimate reasons why, but they were literally at square zero. A lot of the energy came from employees essentially saying, the way I interact with other organizations is better with AI in these ways. And all we need to do is turn this one simple thing on to provide the same kind of experience to our members, to our employees, or whatever. So they were literally new to us innovations. But it unlocked the entire basis for an innovation roadmap, at least a near-term innovation roadmap, that the organization then began, kind of moving towards and implementing in a way that made their chief counsel feel like she wasn't being stuffed to the sideline and told regulation and compliance doesn't matter. Right. So, that was kind of a composite story of like, the three horizons and why sometimes unlocking that first horizon is right. To briefly, because I know we're at 2:00, talk about the kinds of things that, kind of not the things we do so much. I don't want to pimp services, but the kinds of things that we see is a lot of organizations that we work with, at least, are still in the early stages of their AI maturity. And we had done some work a while back, a couple of years ago, maybe almost 3 years ago, as we were founding the firm, to look at, sort of a variety. We did a bunch of research, spoke with a whole mess of people in organizations, and put together a maturity model, which you're welcome to. It's free. It's out there. You're welcome to share. In the show notes, I'll give you that link. But, um, you know, we still find a lot of organizations are kind of trapped in the experimentation phase or an ad hoc phase, like really early in their digital or their AI journey. So a lot of organizations are still, no matter how it feels and no matter what you're hearing in the marketplace, are still struggling to get past that sort of ad hoc experimentation. A lot of organizations are still struggling to really feel the impact that they can measure, whether it's in the bottom line or the top line growth. It's not all efficiency; it's also growth and new opportunity. So it is. I'm not arguing organizations have the time to dilly dally and wait and sit on their hands and see what happens. They don't. Individuals don't. Right? Whether you believe there's going to be widespread unemployment or this is all going to blow over and be a bunch of fluff, you owe it to yourself to learn how to use these tools effectively. It's non-negotiable. Same is true for organizations. It will become table stakes. It's just part of your stack. But a lot of organizations are stuck. And a lot of, it's important to really identify the use cases that make sense for you. Be willing to experiment, be willing to do a lot of stuff, be willing to cut quickly. I think we saw that recently with Johnson & Johnson, right? Where they came out and made a statement about how 80% of their AI experiments weren't working and they killed them. And some people said, look at that, AI doesn't work. But the correct answer is no, that's strategically sound. That's how it should work, right? The 80-20 rule in action. Double down, try a lot of stuff because none of us knows, right? But then, kill the things, kill your, what's the right phrase? It's not kill you babies, kill your, whatever it is, you know what I mean? But, right. The stuff that, kill your darlings or whatever, the stuff that doesn't work,
right.
Innovate, jettison it. So being willing to do that, but doing it from a standpoint of having a grounded strategic approach, right? Really thinking hard about which use cases are a fit for your organization. They support your larger strategy, and also which are feasible for your organization. You're able to execute it without, massive negative impact on your workforce, with the data assets that you have in hand, with the infrastructure you have in place, with the budget that you can allocate. These things are critical. And what we tend to find is, the stumbling blocks are never, we're not sure whether we should pick ChatGPT or Claude. It's always, we have a ton of technical debt. Our systems are not up to snuff and we can't implement anything, on our stack. It's our data is a mess. It's siloed away in dozens of systems and that department won't even let us have their stuff. We've never documented a workflow. Or we have documented workflows that people aren't following because they don't work. Or it's culturally, we're not ready. We don't have the AI literacy. There's resistance in the organization. Or bringing it up to the top, leadership has not set a clear vision and having created the kind of hope that our employees expect from them in order to get on board with the AI journey.
So leaders, what you just heard is if you're struggling on a maturity scale, if you feel like you're stuck in the experimentation phase or whatever phase it might be and you're not advancing, you need to contact Greg. You need to follow Greg's content. That's absolutely.
That was not my objective, but
but no, you are an expert on it, and Greg, that's what I appreciate is I'm always learning things from you on this topic, and I'm grateful that I got to have a front row seat to pick your brain today and learn more about these things and get better and sharpen. And I'm grateful that our community members of the PFM community got to do it live and see it today. Vince, thank you for some of the comments you put in there. Chelsea, you put some comments too. So obviously those who are in the community, you can reach out to Greg directly, DM him, follow his content inside the PFM community, but also he's got a big presence on LinkedIn. Follow him there as well. And the name of your company is Cognitive Path. What's the best way for them to learn more about Cognitive Path?
So to learn more about Cognitive Path, the easiest way is cognitivepath.com. And the AI maturity model I discussed, we have a use case evaluation framework. There's lots and lots of tools there. They're all free. They're not gated at the moment, so you're welcome to grab them. You can also access our Substack from there. My business partner, Jeff, does most of the writing on Substack because I'm lazy. But there's a lot of, hundreds of articles on various aspects of AI there, all accessible through cognitivepath.com. And for anybody who's more interested in my work, sort of more broadly as a futurist and whatnot, that's gregverdino.com. So those are the two places to find me other than looking for me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty much Greg Verdino on any social platform, but LinkedIn's the only one I care about right now.
All right. I love it. Thank you so much, my friend, for being on and for helping us all level up and understand the AI game and how we evolve and adapt and be smart about it in terms of our approaches. Greg, it's been a blast. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for everybody who's tuned in live and anybody who happens to catch up on this when we're on demand as a podcast.
You got it. We'll see you next time, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Working Forward. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Until next time, here's to building tomorrow today.